Look at the terrain of northern India. If an invading army crosses the Hindu Kush Mountains heading for the capital of Delhi, they are inevitably squeezed out of the high Khasas and into a single, massive flatland. This geological funnel meant that whoever commanded this specific plain dictated the political future of the entire subcontinent. This chart maps the three defining clashes fought here at Panipat: Babur against the Lodi Empire in 1526, Akbar's forces against Hemu in 1556, and the Marathatas against the Afghan Durrani Empire in 1761. Observe the comparative force sizes. Across a 235-year span, the invading force was heavily outnumbered by the established domestic army. Yet in all three instances, the numerically superior local force was entirely annihilated. These consecutive defeats track back to specific evolutions in three exact variables: combined arms technology, command flexibility, and logistics. To understand exactly how these massive armies were dismantled, we will track these variables across a comparative 3x3 matrix, evaluating the 1526, 1556, and 1761 battles side by side. Panipat served as a brutal laboratory, repeatedly proving that immense troop numbers collapse when built on outdated military doctrine. The first variable is technology. By the 16th century, Indian warfare relied heavily on static troop formations and the biological shock of war elephants. But gunpowder warfare forced an immediate recalculation. This schematic shows Babur's Ottoman device. He arranged 700 tied carts to stabilize his cannons. When Lodi led his war elephants against this barricade, the unfamiliar cannons fired, panicking the animals and driving them backward to trample their own infantry. 30 years later, the math repeated itself. The Hindu king Hemu held massive numerical superiority over the Mughal forces, but he suffered a catastrophic operational loss before the battle even began, when his artillery train was captured by a Mughal advance party. Without his own cannons, Hemu relied on his war elephants to break the Mughal center. The Mughals absorbed the charge and held their formation, and aggressively attacked Hemu's exposed flanks using missile-equipped cavalry. By 1761, the problem evolved from having cannons to mobilizing them. The Marathas deployed heavy French-made artillery, powerful but entirely static. The Afghans answered with the Chaternal, camel-mounted swivel cannons. This trajectory graphic illustrates their mechanical advantage. Because of their elevated position on the camels, these fast-moving units could fire in a parabolic arc directly over the heads of their own infantry, cutting down incoming Maratha cavalry while the riders remained fully mounted. In all three engagements, the integration of mobile gunpowder technology completely neutralized the advantages of static firepower and overwhelming biological mass. Our second variable is command structure. This image shows the socio-economic prestige attached to Mughal cavalry. Elite breeds and elaborate armor were explicit status markers. This emphasis created a distinct vulnerability, the expectation of the warrior emperor. Leaders were culturally required to be highly visible, personally leading from the absolute front. This diagram demonstrates the counter-strategy: Babur's strict, decentralized flagellity in 1526, known as the Talukma. He split his army into autonomous left, right, and center blocks, which were further subdivided into forward and rear flanking divisions capable of acting independently. Contrast that modularity with the monolithic structure deployed by Hemu in 1556. His entire strategy relied on a massive, singular push forward with his heavy cavalry and elephants. When the Mughal cavalry successfully flanked his massive central block, Hemu responded according to the warrior emperor doctrine. He personally led a series of desperate countercharges to break the encirclement. This centralized leadership invited an immediate breaking point. Hemu was struck by a stray arrow. Seeing their commander fall, his army instantly panicked and routed. The 1761 engagement showcased another failure of command flexibility. The Maratha commander deployed a rigid, front-heavy formation, entirely rejecting traditional Maratha guerrilla warfare tactics in favor of a static, pitched battle. Facing this rigid line, the Afghan commander maintained strict tactical discipline. He kept a massive strategic reserve of 15,000 troops off the front lines, deploying them only when the Maratha center reached its absolute breaking point. To enforce this structure, Abdane deployed provosts to execute his own fleeing soldiers, preventing a frontline collapse and forcing units to hold their positions. Armies built around the fragile cult of a single, highly visible leader, or tied to rigid, non-adaptive formations, consistently collapsed when dismantled by decentralized, modular command structures. The third variable is logistics. Tactical geometry and advanced weaponry are entirely useless without the fuel to sustain them. These massive armies were the endpoints of vast socio-economic logistical engines. This map tracks the critical Mughal horse trade network. The empire controlled key routes from Kabul, Kandahar, and Surat. By imposing customs duties on these imported horses, the state generated immense tax revenues that directly funded state-run breeding farms. In sharp contrast to this robust supply baseline, the Maratha campaign of 1761 was undone by a catastrophic series of diplomatic and logistical failures. The Afghan leader used intense diplomacy to secure local alliances and supply lines with regional powers. The Maratha commander alienated regional leaders, fighting 1,000 miles from his capital entirely without local support. This overhead view illustrates the resulting trap. The Afghans completely encircled the Marathas' bloated camp at Panipat, severing their supply lines. Over 2.5 months, this massive concentration of humans and animals exhausted all food and firewood. On January 14th, the Marathas launched the Third Battle of Panipat as a desperate, starving, and violent breakout attempt. Attrition and diplomatic isolation can mathematically negate an army's combat capability long before the first cannons fire. This completed Panipat matrix visualizes the strict historical pattern. In all three instances, the victorious force held decisive advantages in at least 2, if not all 3, of these core variables. The political fallout from these variables dictates modern history. The 1526 victory resulted in the total erasure of the Delhi Sultanate's Lodi dynasty and the immediate birth of the Mughal Empire in India. In 1556, the technological and command failures of Hemu eradicated the remnants of the Sur Empire, cementing Mughal dominance over the north for the next 2 centuries. This manuscript captures the chaotic density of the 1761 conflict, which produced horrific casualties on both sides and shattered the myth of Maratha invincibility. The destruction of a whole generation of Maratha leadership at Panipat triggered intense internal succession disputes and critically delayed their northern expansion. This exact power vacuum, the absence of a unified dominant Maratha force in the north, cleared the path for the British East India Company to begin its systematic territorial takeover of the subcontinent. The historical record at Panipat strips away the romanticism of warfare. Raw numbers, entrenched positions, and historical momentum do not conquer territory. The subcontinent was mastered exclusively by those who integrated mobile gunpowder technology, maintained structural command discipline, and ruthlessly managed their supply chains.